On today's episode of Trading Up, we meet someone who, at a relatively young age, has taken the reins of a powerhouse in Northern Ireland's tech industry. This firm was the anchor tenant, so to speak, in the region's post-peace foreign direct investment from the US. So let's find out what's happening a quarter of a century later and how the guest today has made it an integral part of the global operation in this Fortune 100 company. Hello and welcome to Trading Up, the business and entrepreneurship podcast from the Irish News, produced in association with EY. I'm Jim Fitzpatrick. I'm delighted today that my guest is Steve McKeown of Allstate. Stephen, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
So let's give us a recap quickly on what Allstate is. What does it do today?
So Allstate is one of the largest insurance companies in the world, particularly in North America. It sells car insurance, home insurance, snowmobile insurance. If you lose your identity, if your identity's stolen, Allstate helps with that. Mobile phones. You think of it, Allstate calls it a circle of protection. It's there, as it says, to help people when life's uncertainties hit.
You're there to provide the insurance. And with a Fortune 100 company, that means you're pretty much at the top of the tree in terms of those big sort of global operations.
It is. It's one of the 100 largest companies in North America and one of the largest globally.
Now, I mentioned that Allstate and Northbrook Technologies, as it was this kind of anchor tenant post Good Friday Agreement. It came to Northern Ireland with big ambitions. Just tell us its initial jobs kind of target was what?
I think it was 50. It sort of varies. It was either 50 or 80, depending on who you talk to. But that was seen as pretty ambitious and a bit of a stretch target.
So 50 jobs coming to Belfast. That was actually big news back in the day. But 50, quickly became a lot more than that. So how quickly did that target get broken and what did it reach?
I think it was in the first 6 months, and then they seen the quality of the talent. They knew what they'd stumbled on. Very much maybe seen as a bit of a hidden gem here at that time. Allstate was signed. Allstate was incorporated, I think, about 2-3 months after the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. So very much a peace baby growing up. And then, as we've evolved and things have evolved, it's just become a more and more integral part of that global company, way beyond the ambitions of what anyone might have thought initially.
Yeah, and you're now running the show. What age are you?
I'm 42, soon to be 43.
42, soon to be 43, and you took over more than 2 years ago. So, bit of a youngster to be running such a big operation. How many people do you look after today?
So I run the European operations for Allstate. That's just under 1,700 people here today.
And for Northern Ireland to still be at the centre of that, and I know things have evolved a little bit, so we'll get into that as we go through. But back in 98 or thereabouts, a company setting up here was probably looking at Northern Ireland as essentially possibly cheap labour, maybe good educated labour, but not necessarily thinking of it as an integral part of their global operations. But that's not the case anymore.
No, it's not, and I think it's a testament to the work and the skills of what people here bring. That the industry didn't exist when Allstate set up. It really was around raw talent. There was 2 local universities producing very, very good graduates. I think Allstate thought, hey, we can take some of that, and we can start building the skills and the expertise. And then, it was quite the journey, but they evolved into some initial pieces of work coming here, support, moving more into helping them maintain some of the core operating pieces of the business, and then we've evolved very, very quickly, even in the last couple of years, just as the whole way that software is built and developed has changed. We've been very much at the forefront of that, leading globally, and I think it's the ability for here to have gone from where we started with, probably, what was seen as ambitious, but really in hindsight quite modest ambitions, really coming in, and over the last 2.5 years or so, here has really started to stand up and lead in terms of how Allstate builds its product, how it serves its customers. I think it's a remarkable journey.
Yeah, so the division that you kind of head up, the European Digital Centre of Excellence, it's not so much that you are the Northern Ireland division. That's your division. You just happen to be primarily located in Northern Ireland. Is that the way it's seen now?
That's the way it is. So initially, and I think same for many large companies coming here, it was access to talent. It was as you said, we can get really talented people maybe at an attractive price. that's not the way Allstate views it anymore. We've changed, from being a company that very much operated internationally to a company that now I would say operates globally. Everyone in our European Centre of Excellence, which is headquartered in Belfast, we have offices in Derry and London as well. Very much part of that global. People reporting into them from across the globe, then been part of that global thing. So the value proposition sort of shifted from here's an opportunity to build a career and good skills to here's an opportunity to truly be at the cutting edge of some pretty exciting things in one of the largest companies in the world.
All right, let's rewind a little bit, Stephen. 42 years old, running this big operation, a key hub in this global operation for a Fortune 100 company. But where did it start for you? Where did you grow up, and what was your education like after that?
I grew up in the Glens of Antrim, up in the northeast coast.
Beautiful part of the world.
Yeah, I won't disagree. I don't think anyone from there would disagree. So a wonderful place to grow up. You can see Scotland from our doorstep, so a very tight connection to the coastline in that part of the world. And yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of a privileged childhood from that side of things.
And then you went to Queen's University. Yeah, so you're singing the praises of the local universities. You're a product of Queen's. What did you study at Queen's, and what took you there?
So my father, if you're going back to the roots, my father ran a small local garage, a country garage. You got to serve your apprenticeship in it. I don't know if that was by choice or if you hadn't wanted to, but you weren't really asked, were you? It was sort of. I think it was assumed, maybe more than asked. But it was good, and it was something I was always interested in. So like technology, engineering was pretty obvious path for me. The ability to build things, solve problems. That was kind of the genesis of it. So, I studied electronic and software engineering at Queen's, and then went on. They had established one of their global research institutes, and then I went on to work as a research engineer in that afterwards.
So, I mean, you could just as easily have been a car mechanic, but obviously you had your education was pushing you to something a bit more kind of in the head in terms of constructing things.
I'd like to think still probably less opportunity now to have hands-on building things, but no, I still that side of it. Just happened to be in software rather than in the car space. Yeah.
So Queen's, at that stage, were you doing a course? I mean, we now talk about the tech industry in Northern Ireland. We know there are many players here, small and big, but at that stage probably there weren't, were there?
No, there wasn't a lot. There were some of the initial large foreign companies come in. There was probably some very embryonic sense of the sort of startup community that's incredibly vibrant here today. But no, it was very much raw product. And I guess I was fortunate in the generation I grew up. I had the opportunity. So I worked and started my professional career in Dublin, but I was able to come back, and there's companies here, companies and opportunities here that there wouldn't have been. I think a lot of my friends would have moved elsewhere for work, and a lot of those guys would have stayed. I was fortunate to be able to start a career on the island and come back here and make a career here. And my kids grew up where I did.
Yeah, that's a nice part, and we'll maybe chat about that later on. But yeah, so tell us a bit about Dublin. And in fact, I think you were there during this whole sort of financial crisis. That was the time when effectively the country was bankrupt. The banks had gone bust. How did that impact your career? What did you do?
Well, I was wet behind the ears I was working for I was a contractor in to work for one of the larger banks, and I joined a project that was supposed to be building a brand new digital shiny bank and all the banking infrastructure and platforms and software for that. I think that lasted about 3 weeks, and then we ended up on NAMA. And then the
National Assets Management Agency, if I remember correctly.
Well remembered. I'm not sure if
just
I
to remind people.
it.
Yeah, which was Ireland's bad bank. It was the one that was supposed to hoover up all the problems and sort them out effectively.
It absolutely was. I think it's imprinted in many people's heads probably. we ended up in the team we were on then ended up working. So we were setting up what was effectively called the bad bank, and then starting to move all of those toxic assets in it, or the higher risk assets, into it. So it went from a very ambitious sort of digital transformation to this needs to get done, and you're in the correct way. So it was great. Lots of long hours, weekends. It was all hands to the pump very much at that stage.
It's pretty crucial to saving the economy, saving the country.
Well, I would say my part in it was quite small, but overall it was. And I suppose you got to see a genuine real world impact from what you were doing, which is not always the case, maybe.
Hi, I'm just interrupting for a quick minute to thank you for being part of the Trading Up community. It's really appreciated. I think we're building a real community of business and entrepreneurship learning. So remember to hit follow or subscribe. It makes a big difference. And please drop me an email on tradinguppodcast@gmail.com. And while I have you, just a quick word about our sponsors, EY. EY bring the right people and technology together to help businesses grow, build trust with stakeholders, and shape a better working world. And EY help businesses shape the future with confidence through trust, innovation, and the power of its people. Because building a better working world starts today. Thanks again. And now back to the conversation.
And I suppose at that time, they were dealing with big numbers. Effectively when a bank is going bust, that's big stuff economically. So the demand then is for reliable information, to be able to understand and interrogate that quickly, and to be able to stand on that. And I suppose now looking back on things, and there was a lot of trauma, real human trauma and tragedy during that whole period. But fundamentally, the view is that Ireland kind of recovered as quickly as any country could from that. So, yes, you were part of a team, but you must have done some things right.
Well, we played our part, and I guess, as I said, it was really clear to know why this needed to happen. So, our job is a very small part, but it was to stand up what would become the government's bank. So from scratch, the idea of setting up a brand new bank from scratch in days and weeks, just unthinkable. It was done. There are an incredible team of people swarming over it. Questions like whose role is what and all the rest kind of go out the window a little bit at that stage. And it's, what do we need to do? How do we get this done? So probably a few lessons in terms of how you can move fast and get important work done that has an impact. But it was, it was really clear, really clear that the Republic was, in difficulties, and this had to happen.
And great experience. You'd have to say. Difficult, great experience though. And you did a PhD then. Was that around that time or after that?
That was just before that.
Just before.
Yeah.
And so you tell us about your PhD and how you developed that.
Yeah, so I had the real good fortune of having a professor called Roger Woods as my final year teacher in my undergraduate degree, and he had put me on to do a little final year project like everyone does. I must have done something right. He presented some of that work at a conference and a company seen it and said, we like that. Can we do a bit more? So it wasn't something I'd ever considered or planned to do, but he'd offered it, and it seemed interesting. It seemed interesting work, and it seemed something good to do. So yeah, I ended up joining his research group, and what was then called ESIT, one of the global research institutes that Queen's had stood up.
And so you've got your PhD, you've done the whole bad bank, building the bad bank with the team in Dublin, and then at some point later on you developed this kind of desire for a bit of entrepreneurship, jump into the whole startup world. So what was that about?
Well, it started with the company I was working for in Dublin, on the bad bank. That had sort of come to a close, and I came to Belfast to do a careers fair for them. So they like to send the alumni back. And as my manager said at the time, he's had sent people to a careers fair he had never recruited before. He's never actually lost someone.
So you were a loss to him at that fair? So
I happened to have a cup of coffee and I catch up with some of the guys from the research institute. They said, "Hey, we're having to think about spinning a company out of that research." And I said, yes, that sounds good. A few months later, we'd started our first company. I was technically employee number 2. And we'd found a space in the corner of the university, started that company, myself and the other guy were, as I say, were the first employees in, trying to figure out what you do. And I suppose the complete opposite of a large company where you have many people who all think it's their role to do something. If you needed to do sales or outreach, well, guess what? It's either me or him. If you need to do some technology development, guess what? It's me or him. Payroll, figuring out how you could set up a payroll. So all of these things you never think about, suddenly they were, if it wasn't my problem, it was his. And if it wasn't his, it was mine.
And what was the focus of the company?
So it was very much aligned with the research. That group was kind of the era of big data, which we ironically had talked about before. And companies had found that they were able to store and keep lots of big data. Some other companies were doing analytics, but very few companies were able to apply sort of analytics and understand what their data was. And that was our specialism. So we ended up doing that for some of our customers were like oil and gas firms, some healthcare firms, those types of things where companies just weren't happy just anymore having the data, but suddenly they figured out we had some expertise in that we were able to bring.
I mean, you had your PhD and everything else, and in a sense, it's not just about a spreadsheet. This is the kind of next level. This is algorithms. This is working out, seeing patterns, being able to sort of really interpret data. It's kind of to get the most out of it effectively.
Yeah, because I think it's relatively easy to have lots of data, and it's relatively easy to do small amounts of analytics. Incredibly hard to do large amounts of analytics at scale, on data sets that might be, in that case it was, around wind farm generation and energy markets, or oil and gas, or, healthcare, where they were starting to get genomics data, and companies maybe hadn't been set up for that, maybe didn't know, and we were able to help them with some of those transitions.
So you've mentioned the kind of practical problems of, doing your sales, HR, all that kind of stuff, finance. But obviously one of the big challenges for any startup is it's kind of capitalization and raising funds. Was that something you had to do?
Yeah, so we had raised, the first company was almost exclusively bootstrapped. So we generated our own internal revenue and run it. That company was successful, and we took it to a point, and then we started a similar group, or some of the same people. We started a second company, and that company slightly different. It was a product company, so we wanted to invest in product, and it was fortunate timing for us, or maybe it was which way around it happens, hard to tell anymore, but some of the venture capital started coming in here. There was access to it in a way maybe that wasn't before if you wanted to set up a company. So yeah, we raised funds for that. Maybe had learned a few hard lessons from the first company. We had the scars of that, and then we started building that second company with venture capital behind it.
Yeah, I mean, in the venture capital process, and again, it's much more developed now here than it would have been then, but it's still kind of a pale reflection of what might go on, say, in San Francisco or Silicon Valley. But just, how does that work for startup companies, and how have you seen it change over the years, even though you're maybe not so intimately involved in it now? But what do you think's the ecosystem's like here?
So it's huge, and I was really surprised when I seen some numbers recently. I maybe hadn't kept my eye on it for a couple of years, and it's orders of magnitude bigger than it ever was when we were raising funds for that company. But I think venture capital, it follows good ideas, it follows success. And I think some of those successful companies that, either just before us or that we were doing at the same time, did really well. That was noticed. That brought in more capital, and then you're seeing more businesses. So, at some point it almost becomes self-fulfilling. A little bit like the Silicon Valley model. You've got the talent is attracted to the capital is attracted to the talent. We always had the talent. We just didn't have the capital in the same way.
Yeah, and I suppose that you've got the talent, but you also need the story that people buy, the credibility. And I suppose maybe that's what we've seen building over the last number of years. You're a Queen's graduate, PhD. We now have an ecosystem where if people are looking to fund things, that they can see a certain credibility there. Maybe they've seen what's happened before, and other companies have come along and have done well. And that's important, presumably, to sort of keep growing that here.
It is, and it's maybe a confidence thing as well. We had to build our own confidence in that company. We knew we could do the engineering side of it, but the confidence to go out and say, hey, we think we can turn that into a company, that's a big jump for a couple of people who are trying to figure things out and maybe
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you
have a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, you probably know, you know how to do it. You know what you can create. You know what the product could be. But maybe you don't know what the revenue potential is, because there's lots of great products that aren't actually commercial at the end of the day. So that maybe is the tricky part, is it?
It is, and I think most companies, if you go back and look, the original idea is very rarely the one they actually take to market. I think for me, and it was a trade mission that went to the west coast of the US. Lucky enough to get invited on, and we're like, okay, we'll go. Didn't quite know what we wanted to do or going to find out from it, but we went there and pretty quickly realized that we had a few local companies from here across, and then there was a few US companies in as well. And we seen all the US and the PowerPoint, and it was so slick, and you're going, wow, these guys are amazing. But when you sort of had the conversation with them afterwards, you're kind of digging in a little bit, you realize that the PowerPoint might have been the only thing they had. With companies from here, it tended to focus on the product, improving it, and a lot more focus there. So it was a little bit of an eye opener. And I think the engineering, the talent, the ability to build, to create, I think it's pretty innate to here. But it was just how do you present it? How do you get that narrative? How do you get that story? So you're sort of the two. It was a pretty stark contrast, and probably opened my eyes to a few things.
Yeah, I love this. I love the way you're suggesting that the ability to build is sort of innate to here. Because we do talk about our industrial heritage and your own family heritage. There, you're talking about your dad and the mechanics, side of things. And that to some extent is the same sort of problem solving that you could apply in a more maybe kind of mathematical sort of way in the software business. And so do you think that we have undersold ourselves then, if you're going over and seeing these Americans with their flashy PowerPoints and their bravado, and when you look behind the curtain, maybe not so much there, but you think we've got quite a lot going on?
I think we do, and it's great to see companies but give some information. You would help, like most people want to see here do well. So, the competition is rarely here. So they're really a good community, and the technology community is quite small. So, you'd come in contact with small companies, you'd sort of maybe give them pointers or maybe introductions or whatever's helpful. You can see that. So I think, that's something we're starting to learn to do. It's, people here are quite humble. It's a good thing. But sometimes you need to step out there, and you need those companies to step out there. And I think they're learning that skill. But it's also coming from the successes. People see the other successes, and then it's like you're not crazy to form a tech. Like when we started a tech company here, it's been pretty obvious idea to start it in Dublin, or London, or even Berlin. If you're building one in Europe, Belfast wasn't probably as obvious a choice. And people are going, well, why? If you started it in Silicon Valley, people are, well, of course that's the obvious place to start it. So that sort of started to go away. People have seen the success. People know that you can build very successful companies from here. And as I say, like the product, the building piece, the engineering, the creating, the ideation piece was never really the challenge from here. It was probably the access and it was the opportunity and the access to the funds to build a company, to get it started. It was also maybe the ambition and the level of ambition to go, like, we could actually build a big company. Like our ambition, we talked about Allstate, and the ambition started small. It can grow. Our ambition started very small with that company as well, and then we started seeing what we were able to do, and maybe the ambition grew a little bit as well.
So what? And I think actually I want to dig in a little bit to this idea of location, not because I just want to keep saying, isn't Northern Ireland brilliant? I think there is something now in what somebody else referred to me as kind of things being a bit more location agnostic, which is something that developed a little bit post-COVID. And this was in a totally different industry. But maybe I want to explore that a little bit as to what's happened with Allstate. So you joined, just over 2.5 years ago. And there's been a refocusing of Allstate and how it plugs into the wider company. So just tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm in this role 2.5 years. I joined Allstate in 2018.
Sorry, yes.
So I was in a CIO, Chief Information Officer role for them. It was one of the first, it was the first time that role had ever been placed outside of the US. So a little bit different. And then, our location here, I think it was highly regarded. It had been well built. We had very skillful people, but the software industry itself, from my seat, it really is unrecognizable from even 4 or 5 years ago. So it was an industry that was changing very, very fast. It may have been, there were more people who were, you would build a piece of software, you'd build something, and then you might look after it for 10 or 15 or 20 years during its lifetime. A lot of that stuff wasn't needed anymore or wasn't going to be needed. And we were able to move quite quickly here as a site, as part of the global Allstate, to lead on that type of work where you were really looking for builders. And then those builders were building products and building new features, and it was much more of a constant evolution of products and ideas. Very exciting stuff, but quite different to some of the ways that a lot of companies, never mind large companies, would have built and maintained software. So we were coming into that sort of emerging world, or rapidly emerging world. If anything, it's gone even faster than someone might have predicted. But we knew we had very, very good people here. So again, the reason Allstate came here in the first place is, we have access here to fantastic talent. We're able to invest in the new skills, and it's a different, emerging set of skills that you need. So we'd made that investment. I was privileged to be asked to take into this role, and it was, as a sort of engineer and a builder myself, to move into a role where you're now building an operations center or a digital center of excellence. Slightly different to building software products, but sort of similar in some ways. But it was really the opportunity to have here lead globally and to pilot a lot of the things that we now do globally. We had done some of those in the areas that I ran for Allstate, or that slice that I ran. Some of them evolved afterwards, some of them evolved in other areas, but it was bringing all of that together and really going, we can lead for a Fortune 100 company from here. So, we've shrunk as a company. Or we've shrunk, in terms of our footprint globally. But as a proportion, we've become a much more key, much more integral piece of that overall company as it's made the shift. And I think very much seem to be on the front foot with that. Probably started some of those, some of that work, some of that skills investment, some of that thought leadership very, very early in that process. And then, we're 2.5 years into that. You're really seeing that come to fruition, and it's amazing because you sort of sometimes catch yourself. You're sitting in an office in Belfast or at home or wherever you happen to be working from, and I seen a clip of our CEO on CNN talking about how the home insurance markets changes coming through like a tsunami, and he's referencing some things, and you're going, I know that a key part of that innovation, the fact that you work for a company that led on it, but a key part of that innovation was developed on the 5th floor in our building in Belfast by a team, and I know those guys, and they do phenomenal work. I suppose that's quite special at times when you can see it, and you think about the journey from the initial 50 people the whole way through to there. So when you're sort of saying to them, and sometimes a little bit like we were talking about the startups earlier, it's going, the engineers never a problem, but it's sort of going, guys, you really are on the leading edge anywhere for this, never mind here.
Yeah, and it's that thing that, again, just to emphasize, this is not about some sort of central function saying we need a solution for X or Y. Let's, draft up what that solution could look like. Let's email it to Belfast and tell them to get on with it as per our instructions. And then they'll come back with something on budget, whatever the budget is we set for that, and then see if it works. It doesn't work like that. I mean, that's kind of an old school kind of view of how things might be ordered, but it's totally different, isn't it?
It is, and you said about on time, on budget. That's the way software, digital, the digital product development used to be measured. It was like, okay, we'll set a spec, and then can you deliver it on time and on budget? And lots of companies operate in that way. The reality is, on time and on budget didn't mean it actually made a difference for the company or for the customer. So it evolves.
Let's just spell that out. I mean, it means that, if you say something has to be on time and on budget, that sounds great from a management point of view. But, something can be on time can be delivered on time, can be delivered on budget, but might still be pretty useless from what it actually should be doing. And you may not even know when you start it exactly what it should be doing. Is that part of the problem?
Yeah, well, absolutely. You called it, and I think we call it having a product mindset. So we think about things as whatever it is you have as a product. So rather than thinking about whether it's running on time and on budget, which kind of talk about vanity metrics. That's one we would talk about as a vanity metric. Is okay. What impact is this supposed to be having for your customer? How do you measure that? How do you know? And you might have a great idea, and you go, this is 50-50 whether it works. If you're kind of running on time, on budget, that doesn't get factored in. If you're looking at, business outcomes and measuring business outcomes, and really, it boils down to that thing we talked about earlier, problem solving. Okay, so there's things that you want to do as a business. What are they? How do we know we're being successful in that? How do you measure those things? And then you've got wonderful talent, and I think this is where the teams here really, really do shine. Is we've got problem solvers sitting around the table with all the different parts of the business, looking to figure out and see how can we solve that, and trying something. You'll test, and 2 weeks later you'll measure it, and you'll see is that actually if there's a customer friction point. Well, let's test something and see, did that help? And if it did, we'll roll that out and do more of it. So it's having that big picture view, but it's also moving much faster. It's trying things. It's experimenting with things. To me, that's the definition of innovation.
Yeah, and without giving away sort of company or state secrets, how do you actually test something? How do you sort of corral a kind of test product without it sort of being a product that your customers say, actually, no, this has failed?
I think it's that it's think big but act small. What would you need to test and prove to do it? So if you've got say you've got a customer who's contacting you on a mobile app, for instance, and you're seeing maybe it looks like they're getting stuck in part of that. Well, can we try and understand why? Could we maybe try and fix part of that and see, does that help remove any of that friction? Does that make a better customer experience? And if you start thinking about it from, well, what's the customer experience? How do we better serve those customers? How do we meet their needs, which is, as a company, what you're there for? And less on, is it on time and is it on budget? You start thinking about, you end up in the world of problem solving rather than kind of management. One of those is a very exciting place to be. One of them, maybe slightly less so for most people.
And that's a big mind shift change. I mean, it's still slightly hard to get your head fully around, but is that a mind shift, a cultural change that's happened throughout the whole organisation? Then
that is something that's happened globally. Allstate's really been at the forefront of that. We're recognised with it's called the Tony Hsieh Award. It's given out at the TED conferences. I don't know if you ever heard of TED. Mm-hmm. Big conference. It's a leading award for organizational culture and radical innovation in the culture, and that award's given out annually. It's never been won by a large company before, because I think getting those type of ideas, that type of mindset into a very large corporation is incredibly hard. You can do it in a small company. You can probably do it in a medium-sized company. Generally, I don't know that it was seen as possible in a large company in the way, at least in the time scale. Allstate won that award this year. And it was a global award, but the work and the teams here certainly played their part in that, and that was really around the mindset shift that you're describing. It's how are we solving? What's our customers need? How are we orientating around customer outcomes and the customer experience? And then it's if you're part of the solution to this, you've got a seat at the table. Doesn't matter what your level is in the organization, doesn't matter where you sit, doesn't matter what business function you're in. Here's something we're trying to achieve. You've got a seat at the table. Let's figure out how to actually achieve that. And it removes all of those silos and some of the traditional ways when maybe the digital world maybe wasn't evolving quite as rapidly as it is now. But it's allowed us to sort of catapult to the front in terms of that. And it changes the dynamic. I'd also say that it's a very engaging way to work.
And that applies at all levels then. So everybody's motivated to be part of the solution, so to speak.
Absolutely. And it goes even further than that, and it flips things in many ways, because when you give people accountability and say you own this product, or which is part of the overall landscape of a large company. You own a piece of that. This is the part that we needed to play. It's incredibly empowering, and then those people, the product managers, people who own that, now have a voice to say, well, actually, I need this from leadership. I need this from you. So it becomes a very much organic, bottom-up way of problem solving and aligning, and maybe less of the, I said on time, on budget. The other piece is, it's directed from the top down. So it's more facilitation. So if you can set, if the business can set very clear goals in terms of what it wants to achieve, people know that that's our role is to play our part in achieving that. Things start to click into place much more organically. You get people much more levels of collaboration organically within those teams. And special things then start to happen when you do that. Whereas if it was people were waiting for me to have all of the good ideas, we would have many fewer good ideas.
Well, you might have had a few, but yeah, I can see the attraction to this, and I can see when you're describing it. I can see it still excites you. You're talking about management processes here, but you're talking about it with a big smile on your face. This has clearly made a real difference to how everybody's working.
It is, and I think we live here. We want to see this place do well. It's part of in Allstate's case, it's part of a large global organization. But it's the fact that people from here are able to lead on a lot of that. As I said, I think gives people a chance to shine. That problem-solving world is one that frankly, our people excel in, and it's a good. It's a good way to work. It's back to why did I do anything in my career? Because you've got it's kind of the joy of solving problems or having an actual outcome. I don't know how exciting it would be if you were turning up every day, you were doing some work and it didn't go anywhere or didn't actually have any outcome. That's kind of limiting. It's not as
I can see a pattern here,
engaging. Because
when you look at your CV, and we've talked about some of your sort of career moves to date. From working, say, setting up the bad bank, NAMA, to developing a startup in Belfast, to joining Allstate at a much bigger kind of Fortune 100 corporation. But there is a common theme here. It seems to me that it is that kind of problem solving, acting fast, maintaining that almost startup culture, regardless of whether you're working with this Fortune 100 company or back setting up a business and bootstrapping it yourselves here in Belfast. Do you see that yourself? Do you feel that that's maybe a reasonable sort of common thread throughout your career?
It's an interesting observation. I think it's the doing things that are meaningful and can make a difference. So we started a company here because we thought we could, and it was a little bit against the odds. We built it and we had really good success with that, probably against the odds, and learned a lot of hard lessons. But it was something worth doing. I think the same in terms of making sure that we have talented people here. It was really clear with the way that the world was evolving, the reasons maybe for having for doing work or for having something set up in a particular way wasn't going to flow into the future. So you want to make sure that you're at the head of that change, that you're driving that change, and you're staying relevant for the long term. We've done that. We've been very successful now at having done that. So I think it's there's probably a few common threads, but it's maybe you're better judging it from the outside than me.
Looking from the outside, but yeah, I mean, in some ways it's very, very different. But it's interesting just seeing that thrown in at the deep end back at NABA mightn't have been a bad start for anybody. But let's, just on that point about taking credit as well, and I think there are people listening to this and watching this on YouTube who might be able to apply some of this to their own business, regardless of size. But let's talk about that taking credit bit. So you did say that you think that the operation here, played its part in winning that award. It's a key award, first time the Tony Hsieh Award's been given to a big corporation. So how have you taken your credit? How have you put your hand up and say, hey guys, we're part of the story here? How have people been kind of rewarded, or what do you do to pat people on the back in your organisation?
So I think we're fully hybrid. So everyone who works for Allstate globally as part of that global team. We have people who work from home some more and come in less. We have people who come in more and work from home a little bit less, but there's all of that. So for us, part of that's about building connections, building culture, community. That's really what a large part of that comes down to. We call them connections events. It's the regular every month where we have people come into the office and do it. We happened to have a very big connections event a couple of weeks ago.
You're
ICC.
ICC. Yeah,
Yes.
Tell us about this. So you had Brian Cox, not the guy from Succession, but
No, not
the
the guy from
famous
Succession.
scientist.
Yes.
And he was over, and tell us a bit about that.
So you're absolutely right. So we had Brian Cox come over. We had double Olympic gold medal winner coming over, talking about. Brian was talking about the universe, and really there's some key themes in there that I'd seen him before, and he was talking about how thinking evolves, and maybe how we thought about things maybe wasn't quite a perfect fit, and that sort of continuous improvement and continuous question of how you do things and ideas, which sort of resonated deeply with kind of the culture that we have built in our building. We had a double gold Olympic medalist come in who
Is that Dame Kelly Holmes?
Dame Kelly Holmes, who was talking about performance mindset, but actually went much deeper into mental health and how you sustain it, and maybe how even when you're winning, in her case, it doesn't always feel like you're winning. It's tough. The types of changes are tough, but can be rewarding at the end. So we're doing that. But it was really around and with other sessions around engagement and getting people to connect and just bringing people in and making sure they feel part of that bigger community, sharing ideas and really questioning and thinking bigger, thinking a bit different. That's around curiosity and the connectivity piece. So that was a fantastic day. We don't do that every week. Someone asked, could that be every Monday? We're like, unfortunately, no.
Every Monday you can't quite hire the ICC
No.
at the Waterfront Hall. No.
But we do things like that. That just happened to be one of the bigger. But I think it's important that sort of on a regular basis, just given the nature of the change, people, we don't need people to be sitting at a desk to do work. But to make the connections, to understand how things are going, to do the ideation, to build the in-person, nothing will replace meeting someone in person, building that connection. Now, work can flow from that later. You'll have the relationship, you'll have the rapport. So we're quite purposeful in terms of how we build that and giving people the opportunities. And then making sure that here, one of the advantages we have is everyone here has the ability to access that. Not all of our staff globally are as close to a location where you might be able to do that. And then you see staff supporting each other. So someone's hit a problem, someone else probably hit a version of that before. How do you share that? How do you lift each other? And that's sort of part of the power and the multiplier of being what we term a European digital centre of excellence. It's having business functions in there who are looking at all the different parts of the business and reimagining it and thinking about what it could look like in the future, with technologists, with data people, with people who understand customer experience and customer demand. So it's that mixing pot of ideas that starts to bubble and come together. So that just happened to be one big example, but it's having that happening on a regular basis and an ongoing basis.
And I suppose there's been a lot of controversy about, in the office or working from home or hybrid, and you've always had a hybrid model, or at least for a long period of time. But I suppose one of the advantages of what you're describing is it's a very conscious effort. So if, let's say you mandated everybody's to come back to the office 5 days a week, well, they could all come back and sit at their own desks and not really talk to each other. But if you're actually consciously thinking about how do we, reward people, how do we recognize, how do we build that teamwork, then actually that's more fruitful.
Absolutely. And I think it always goes to the question, why? What are you doing this for? And it's not because you want people sitting at a particular desk on a particular day. That's probably a bad way to do it. So sort of almost be careful what you measure, be careful what you're counting. I think most companies would recognize, and most people would recognize, that there is a feeling part of a wider community, being part of a wider community, hearing other people sharing ideas allows you to keep at the head of your game. In my mind, there's either, if you're an expert in it, then you would love you to come in and share that with other people. And if you aren't an expert in that particular thing yet, then come in and you'll learn from someone and you'll have something else to contribute back in. So there's a really nice sort of synergy comes from that. But it's, that's the goal, is to help upskill people. Let's help have them think about things. Let's help keep them at the front end and maybe not get caught out by the pace of change that probably happening in our industry at the minute. And that allows you to lean in. You hear other things. You'll have an idea. You'll reach out. You'll know the connection. You'll know who to set up the
as you say,
the Skype meeting.
Driven by the why is the important thing. So what about for you then? You're based here in Northern Ireland. You're still living in Cushendall, yeah,
by
the sea there, and beautiful Glens, as you say. How's that working out for you? You've got, is it 2 children?
I have 2 children.
2 children. So you're father, married, living in Cushendall, and I believe you're involved in the lifeboat, yeah?
I am. So I'm volunteer crew in the offshore lifeboat at Red Bay. And not just me, there's a few others.
Including your wife, yeah?
Yes, my wife's in it as well.
Yeah, so that's quite a commitment to do that. What drew you to that? Why did you want to get involved in the lifeboat?
I think it's probably living on the coast. So I'm the mechanic, a couple of roles, one's crew, the other's mechanic. So probably there's something very deep in that apprenticeship I mentioned earlier in the garage.
Your father taught you well.
Had some of the synergies, but then we go out in the water. We part of a little rowing club that started up during COVID. Wonderful for mental health, getting out first thing in the morning. If I don't get to do it as much as I'd like, but when you do, I personally love being on the water. And I suppose when if you spend enough time in the water, you will probably need some help at some point. And I'd love to think that someone would be coming to help when you needed it. So it's a fairly easy decision.
We've all watched Saving Lives at Sea, and quite often, one of the Northern Ireland lifeboats will be featured. Anybody that's been out in the water, will know that things can change pretty dramatically, especially around our coastline. And of course, from Cushendall, we've had on the podcast before both Tom and Connor from Red Bay Boats and the brilliant boats they build down there. But you get out of the bay there, and you're hitting Rathlin. The next thing you're into the North Channel, and those are dangerous waters. Yeah,
they're tricky waters. So Connor crews on the lifeboat as well. So I know Connor very well. But it's tricky waters. But you want people to use them. You want people to be able to use them safely. There's never people give up their time willingly. There's also a really strong sense of camaraderie within the crew. You have a really good group of people who are all doing it for the right reasons. Want to give back, want to do something meaningful.
If you're working from home in Cushendall, can you also then be on call for the lifeboat at certain times? And does that happen?
Yeah, and I think we were chatting just before the podcast, and I was working from home, and I did have a pager on. So you cover and maybe ask for some forgiveness sometimes from work if it happens to go off.
It's not. I mean, that's an excuse I could buy if I'm more senior to you, which is a pretty big job in your organisation. But if you're going out literally to potentially save somebody's life.
Yeah.
So, in some ways, it seems to me that you maybe have the best of all worlds, because you've got the idyllic home setting there. You're, as you say, making your commitment to your community. You're plugged into this global organisation. You've got a base here in Belfast. What's not to like? Yeah, people should be envious of your career. Do you think?
Well, I think I'm spoilt in terms of where I get to live and that side of it. It's. People from there think it's quite special. I wouldn't disagree with any of them.
But you do have to travel a bit, presumably, and are you able to manage all of that, presumably because of the role that you now do? I would imagine you're probably off to the States on a reasonably regular basis, are you?
Yeah, so currently, obviously, offices here you'd be in, but all of them, relatively easy commuting distance. And then, in the US, corporate headquarters in Chicago, so you'd be in Chicago a good few times a year.
But again, important on that social bit to go and show your face once in a while. You can't always be just on Zoom. So
and we've got leadership spread all out. So again, it's all about our people here connecting and getting to know each other and doing those pieces. We have a leadership team that's spread globally as well. So I'm not the only one based outside of the US, never mind Chicago. So
and I suppose just to kind of round us off then, in this new era of AI and the massive changes we're likely to see as a result of that, where do you think it'll impact on your business, and what do you think it'll do for the ecosystem here in Northern Ireland?
So it's it's good questions. And the first thing I would say is it's probably happening even faster than I probably thought it was going to happen faster. And you see it happening even faster, which is where just how we operate and the changes that we've made, I think have put us in a very good position. And I mentioned some of the work that is being delivered or contributed to from here, really being at the front end of some of that. First and foremost, we see it as a way to improve the customer experience and to help people do their job. I think as a engineer, software engineer, that's not new. Ever since I graduated from Queen's and what I was learning there, there's always been better ways. There's always been like people building tools to help you do your job. So the way that software is built was nothing like how it was built there. I think the AI assisted tools is coming in to help people build better software, and really it's putting more of a focus. It's less about fingers on keyboard writing lines of code, and it's more about how you're thinking about problem solving. Do you know? And sometimes the hardest bit is knowing the problem that you want to solve. Is it well defined? If the problem's not well defined, it's hard to have a good solution to it. So that's the type of thing. And then some of those tools just come in and they help make that more productive. It's sort of maybe a slightly more extreme of like predictive text. It's guessing what you want to guess, and it'll get it right sometimes and not. But you need to know what you want to say. You need to know what you want to do and where you're driving it.
But you're not pessimistic overall. Would you be reasonably optimistic then as to what it will do for people and for work?
Well, I think it's around having really talented people, which we have in abundance here. I think it's in making sure that we're helping to invest in those skills and lead. Allstate's made an unprecedented investment in digital skills here, which has helped us lead. I see other companies now starting to do the same. That's really important. But it kind of plays maybe to some of our advantages in a way that when you want huge scale, we're still quite a small place. It was probably hard to win, and when scale and economies of scale were the thing. It's much more around quality now. It's much more around having people, maybe smaller teams even, who are doing the problem solving and then using those tools to solve the problems. So, no, I'd be very optimistic about the opportunities for here. And then I think already seeing companies moving and starting to seize those opportunities, I think it actually plays well to the type of product that we offer as a region. But we do need to, now's the time to move on it. And some companies have moved and some companies are starting to move. Well,
we'll maybe come back in a little bit. We'll check in on that one and see where things are in a few years' time. Stephen, listen, thanks a million for taking us through all of that today. Good luck with everything. Good luck on the next time you're on a shot in the lifeboat as well. Thanks for joining us on Trading Up.
Thank you very much.